Welcome to the Reconnect Factor, the podcast of the Power Play Reconnect experience. I'm your host, Ruth Haskins. Today, I don't have a quote. I just want to talk about something that's so important to me and to many others. You know, everything we experience is connected. What we see, hear, feel, taste, and touch have mutual and connected sources. Most of the times we fail to pay attention, but these connections are real, and if we are wise, we do take time to notice. Unfortunately, we live in a very disconnected world. There was a time when humans were uniquely responsive to their surroundings, and our survival actually depended on that connection. However, in our modern world, we are connected to the rewards of industrialization as well as its grandchild, technology. So none of these advancements are bad in themselves. Actually, I prefer a dual washer-dryer to beating clothes on rocks down at the old mill stream. Yet the connections that we have lost through all of our obvious growth, the one that's the most important and the one that's the most detrimental, is the connection that we've lost to self. There's no deep secret that in this modern world, while our bank accounts grow and educational accolades increase and technology advances at warp speed, we are all suffering from a worsening mental health. The COVID-19 pandemic, at its greatest intensity and its aftermath, has put an exclamation mark on this issue. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. Because whether we want to admit it or not, we all, each and every one of us, was affected by the pandemic. And the pandemic made our mental health status shaky. Now, as a country, we were already using therapy bolstered by pills to cope with everyday stressors that were overwhelming. Then came the pandemic, and though we were hidden behind closed doors, so true for many seniors, and allegedly safer, it was in many ways the greatest challenge that we had just in trying to maintain our mental and emotional health. Now, truth be told, I was among the group, senior and single and living alone. I remember someone asking me after the first few months of the pandemic how I felt. And this was probably maybe 2 or 3 months into the pandemic. And my response was, I feel untouchable. Because I lived in a seniors building, we were a pretty gregarious bunch. We used to gather everywhere to greet, chat, and congregate in small or large groups. There were a host of activities where we could gather, never mind the frequent visits to the exercise room, the library, and even the management office. Sometimes we just stopped into the building manager's office to jokingly harass the maintenance staff and help ourselves to that well-stocked candy bowl. All that camaraderie and connectedness ended on Friday, March 13th, 2020. The world as we knew it and had experienced it stopped, cold, like someone throwing the brakes on an 18-wheeler or a Boeing 747 jet. We came to a screeching, hard halt, and some of us actually got thrown off the runway, emotionally and mentally speaking. I was blessed. My spiritual family that very same evening became visible only through Zoom. It was a blessing, nonetheless. It was an altered world with no warm smiles, no warm hugs, no warmth. This is a screen. We were all present, but we couldn't touch each other. That is why I answered the question of one of my spiritual sisters with the words, I feel untouchable. I felt as if I had suddenly developed leprosy, full-blown leprosy. And no one could touch me. No one could come visit me. No one could come into my apartment. I couldn't go into anyone else's apartment. We were so utterly shut down that it was an inhuman, unhuman experience. So these words that I said, I feel untouchable, it wasn't a poetic expression. Really, we were all suddenly untouchable. I couldn't touch anyone. No one could touch me. There were no warm embraces, no laughter. The only thing that I saw in people's eyes was terror. Frightened eyes peered at me over cotton-mouthed barriers. Everyone's voice that I heard in my building was muffled. Even on Zoom, family members who worked outside the home appeared masked for the safety of their families, and their voices were muffled. So we all became untouchable. Those who were able to be outside the home for any reason, grocery shopping, felt the sting of the 6-foot gap. Not only did we feel the sting of it, stressing our needs as social beings, we fell into the gap of fear, and we turned that fear on others, which was really interesting. Eventually, within a matter of weeks, we became terrified of any type of proximity to another human. And sometimes it erupted into fear-inspired verbal and, unfortunately, physical altercations. We all react differently to fear. And the fear that anything at any moment can take your life or the life of a loved one, when the mind is unprepared for it, can spark horrific reactions. So there is an untold story about what the pandemic did to our mental health. We watched the world die by the thousands, and we waited on the new normal. The new normal came, and we continue to look on in horror at the chaos that has become a pandemic. The pandemic in itself was bad enough, but the chaos that has come into being in the aftermath of the pandemic is as bad as the pandemic, and that chaos is global. So much time is spent talking about inventing a new future. We've gone past the new normal. Now people are talking about a new future that we are going to invent. The same ones who created the pandemic and continue to bring about all this chaos are the ones who are going to invent a new future. But the truth is that that future won't happen without the sure emotional and mental health of those people who are actually the foundation of the future. The people who are the foundation of the future are the elderly for their wisdom and the youth for their strength. The pandemic created a global human experience of being untouchable in the worst possible way. We still haven't given a name to this particular epoch in human history, but it has given rise to a level of untouchable that is more than physical with mental health repercussions. It's almost as if a new class of humans has appeared whose hearts are untouchable. These are the ones who continuously create chaos, not caring what effect it has. It's as if the pandemic allowed the hearts of these people to blossom into their fullest expression. Greed, terror, cruelty, selfishness, bigotry. The list goes on. All the elements chaos requires. So for those seniors who have watched the world for half a century or maybe more, we felt left behind by the COVID-19 pandemic. We became the untouchables until the world turned to its new normal. And it has taken, whether people realize it or not, great effort for those of us who didn't die from disease, isolation, or suicide to grab hold of this chaotic new world, new normal. So what's interesting is that we have decided that it is this world that is untouchable. You can dress it up all you want to. You can dress it up in the finery of modern technology and all the material wealth you can. But we know what's beneath it all. The pandemic revealed a greater disease for which there is no name, and there is no man-made cure. More than just a thought. This is the Reconnect Factor, the podcast of the Power Play Reconnect experience. Thank you for listening.